I'm Dwayne Brown tonight on KPBS Evening Edition. Helping combat amputees become mobile and motivated. The medical experts in San Diego who know what it's like to walk in their shoes.
It's the end of an era at San Diego City Beat. I'm Peggy Pico with the weekly magazine's editor Dave Rolland on his move out of journalism and into the political world. But first, new predictions for a much bigger earthquake in California. Why jumping quakes are worse than we first thought.
And love is in the air at the San Diego Zoo. The zookeepers who are setting the mood for a pair of frisky pandas. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. There is an unusual coalition on Capitol Hill. 3 senators from both sides of the aisle want to end the federal ban on medical marijuana. They introduce a bill that would eliminate uncertainty surrounding marijuana use. It covers California and 22 other states that allow it for medical purposes. The measure would also reclassify marijuana, making it easier for doctors to prescribe it. The CDC calls it a nationwide epidemic, the diversion of medicine for recreational drug abuse. Hundreds of doctors gathered today here in San Diego to discuss ways they can help cut down on prescription drug abuse. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg joins us from the newsroom with the latest. Kenny, how would you describe the prescription drug abuse problem here?
Well, it's an epidemic here and nationwide. In San Diego County over the last 5 years, more than 2,500 people have died from a prescription drug overdose. In fact, nationwide, prescription drug overdoses have surpassed car crashes as the leading cause of accidental death. Now, I spoke today to Dr. Ronit Lev, who is the chair of the San Diego County Prescription Drug Abuse Task Force. And she says doctors need to do a lot more to help curb this problem.
Something has to be done. It's not safe and it's not acceptable for people to be dying from prescriptions that we give, and these are all potentially preventable deaths.
Kenny, I understand the county task force has come up with some recommendations for doctors?
That's right. And one of the recommendations is before doctors prescribe prescription painkillers like OxyContin or Vicodin or anti-anxiety drugs like Xanax, they should check the statewide database called Cures that can indicate whether somebody is doctor shopping for narcotics. The task force also recommends that doctors have their patients sign a special agreement that lists all of the risks of these drugs, and when the patient signs it, they pledge not to abuse these medications or to look around at other providers to get more of these drugs. Now, I spoke to a woman named Susan Foster who lost her son to a prescription drug overdose in 2011. And she says doctors really need to take responsibility for this stuff.
It's very, very important that the physicians take responsibility in helping to end it.
Why does the task force believe it's important for all doctors to be on the same page regarding this?
Well, if all doctors aren't going by the same prescription guidelines, then the people who abuse drugs will seek these doctors out. In other words, if they're not being scrutinizing patients when they come in to ask for these kinds of medications, then the people that abuse these medications will find them, they'll spread the word, and the problem will continue. So that's why the task force is recommending that all doctors get with these guidelines.
KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg. We are seeing the deadliest flu season in San Diego County ever. There were 4 more flu-related deaths reported last week. This brings the total number of cases to 72, the highest on record. The county's public health officer says a majority of patients who died did not have vaccinations. Hundreds of military members lost arms and legs during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Many find help and motivation inside the prosthetic department at the San Diego VA. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy has more on the special connection they share with those they're providing care for.
Come on in, Jeremy.
When veterans come to the prosthetics department at the San Diego VA hospital in La Jolla,
So today we're going to fit you with your new weightlifting arm.
They're cared for by some people who know what it's like to walk in their shoes.
I put my legs on in the morning and I take them off at night, just like my patients do. So I can relate.
Rob Hanley has worked in the prosthetics field for 15 years.
And can you go through full range of motion? Any pain? Nope.
He's also a double amputee.
I lost my legs when I was 6 years old. It was a result of a birth defect.
Now he fits and fabricates artificial limbs for others.
I'll cast the patient's residual limb and make a custom-made socket to attach to their residual limb. From there, we will order components, feet, knees, to be able to get the patient back to doing what they would like to do.
Often there's relief in the eyes of patients Hanley meets for the first time.
I think it gives them a sense of ease, maybe, that they know somebody else that's working with them has gone through it. And have you take just a couple steps. Cool.
Someone else who has gone through it is the chief of the prosthetics department, Tristan Wyatt. The Army veteran lost most of his right leg from a rocket attack in Iraq in 2003.
It pierced the armor of the armor personnel carrier we were in, and it hit me in the knee, and it hit the guy that was next to me in the hip, and it came out of his back, and then it hit the guy in the gunner hatch, like right below the knee. So it took out like 3 of us in one shot.
The 3 men, all friends, were among the war's first amputees. They spent years together recovering.
It was helpful, like, that my friends were there with me. It was good that, I had a support system with the other 2 guys, and the hardest part was going home. You go home and it's, you go back to, a town in a world that looks completely different.
Wyatt started working for the VA 10 years ago as an intern. He wanted to help other veterans. Now he's in charge of a $25 million department budget that lets him make sure veterans get the prosthetics, equipment, and care they need.
I want to make it the best possible experience for these guys. I don't like any kind of inefficiency. I don't like any, kind of hiccup. I want everybody to come in the door and get taken care of.
The San Diego VA serves nearly 15,000 post-9/11 veterans. 3 times as many call San Diego County home. Amputees have become emblematic of the toll of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Nearly 1,600 service members lost an arm or a leg. Hundreds lost multiple limbs, like San Diego Marine veteran Jorge Salazar.
I was doing a security patrol and stepped on IED. And immediately became a double amputee above the knee.
2.5 years later, Salazar has rebounded from his combat injuries. Now he even competes in wheelchair basketball, including this week at the Paralympic trials at Camp Pendleton.
If I didn't have these sports, I wouldn't know what I would be doing. I knew I would have to go get a job or go to school, but if it wasn't for this, I would be probably a little lost. There you go.
He says the San Diego VA prosthetics team helped him find his way.
When someone that has been through what you've been through and you understand them and they understand you, it's a lot more comforting. It's very nice seeing another veteran working for you.
Ah, that feels much better.
It's much better.
For the VA's Wyatt and Hanley, it's about giving hope.
We have a connection to it because we are users of the service. And not to say that, we have more of a vested interest than other people do, but I think it's closer to our hearts. It's something that we want to do. We're here because we want to be, not because we have to be. And that's really easy to bond over.
Amputees tend to migrate towards each other, and we definitely relate. My birth defect is different than his traumatic injury, but again, we still have to put a prosthesis on in the morning and take it off at night and go about our day, and we try to do that the best we can.
Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Katie Shulov helped produce that story. The task force appointed by the mayor to pitch a plan for a new Chargers stadium has completed half of its mission. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Minto says the group announced a location for a proposed facility.
The task force unanimously chose Mission Valley as the best location to build the Bolts a new home. Spokesman Tony Manalato says the group chose the location over one downtown because of cost savings, development opportunities, and transportation options. In a statement, Mayor Kevin Faulconer thanked the task force for working quickly and said he looks forward to the group's other assignment, figuring out how to pay for it. The task force gave itself a May deadline after the Chargers proposed building a joint stadium with the Raiders near LA. The Chargers wouldn't comment on the Mission Valley announcement, but in the past, they've made their preference for a downtown stadium well known. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
From one proposal to another, a petition drive for a Charger Stadium in Carson up north starts tomorrow. That proposed NFL stadium would be shared between San Diego and the Oakland Raiders. 8,000 signatures are needed to qualify for the ballot. Teams are competing with a rival proposal in Inglewood and will push for the stadium if they fail to get new ones in their current hometowns. The likelihood of a mega earthquake in California has increased. Peggy Pico has more on the forecast for San Diego County.
The risk of an 8.0 magnitude earthquake shaking up California in the next 30 years has increased dramatically. That's just one important update from the U.S. Geological Survey that says quakes can jump from one fault to another as far as 7 miles away. My guest, Pat Abbott, is here to explain why these details matter. And Pat, the USGS found there's an increase of this 8.0 magnitude earthquake over the next 30 years in California. We actually have a map of that forecast. We're looking at it right now. What are we seeing here? We see red faults and orange faults and yellow.
Well, you see there, they look like panels. Of course, the faults go down 10 or 12 miles deep. And when you see that, like, for example, you start at the lower right-hand end of California, you can kind of follow the San Andreas Fault all the way up to the north. And you see the faults, and you see them, those depths, and the color is something about the frequency. The purplish reddish end, those are the ones that give off big earthquakes, 6.7 and above more often. And then the bluer areas, not as much of a chance of the fault moving or being shaken severely in those areas.
Sure, so the big red line we're seeing, that's the San Andreas Fault. And then here in San Diego, it's the orange, so still significant, but not as big as San Andreas. These results were calculated, what we were looking at with these maps and the projections on them, on 300 fault lines in California. How were these faults identified, and is it more faults than we used to think we had?
Well, yes, it is. Both of those. We do it two main ways. Geologists, we map the lines, the offset lines along the Earth where you see where rocks have been moved. For the seismologists, the more of the little earthquakes, epicenters, don't have to be big ones, that you plot below the surface, you start defining planes and recognize faults that don't even break the surface. So we now know of more faults, and they don't all break the ground. That's why the number increases so much now. More
three-dimensional knowledge sort of got you to that number. We knew earthquakes could jump from one fault. We've known for a little while they could jump from one fault to another. But this report finds that they can jump much further than previously thought. Give us an example of how a jumping earthquake might cause a bigger magnitude, or what it does.
Well, you know, when we look at the faults, they just look like two-dimensional lines on the surface. But at depth, some go down straight, but some of them curve, and some of them may meet each other. So in other words, instead of just saying one fault moving, if it jumps and causes another one to move at the same time or shortly thereafter, that's the whole energy business. The longer a fault moves, both in terms of distance and time, it's emitting energy the whole way. So if one fault also gets the second one going, bigger earthquakes. And that's what comes out in the statistics.
How do jumping fault lines, you were just touching on this, how do they actually increase the magnitude? So wouldn't it diffuse the energy if you had the San Andreas Fault shift something and then that bumped? By the time it got, let's say, hopefully down to us on a Rose Canyon Fault or something, wouldn't it diffuse it? Why does it increase the magnitude?
The faults, even at 7 miles apart, those are still relatively close. Now, the worst case scenario I know of was in 1957 Mongolia, and that looks a lot like LA. There's a big, long San Andreas-like looking fault, and that started moving, and it triggered effectively two Northridge earthquakes along its path by causing, as it's moving along like this, it caused some other ones to move like that, and the more faults moving, each one of them is generating energy. You keep adding them up, therefore it's a bigger magnitude shake for us.
Sure. Let's talk about this impact of going from a 7.8, which was a predicted number for a magnitude in California, to now an 8.0. What kind of difference would that make when it comes to the actual results of having an 8.0 earthquake in Los Angeles and San Diego?
Well, it's huge. You know, the numbers are deceiving. You say 7.8, 8.0, that's almost the same thing, isn't it? No. No, a magnitude 8 earthquake is be the equivalent of 35 magnitude 7s. So when you go up each tenth of a point, you're having significant increases. So it's more like a doubling of the energy release, and well, that's a huge effect on us.
Do you think that our building codes and our earthquake preparedness could handle that big of a jump, 35 times more than a 7.8?
No, 35 times more was from a 7
so from
to
an 8. I understand.
And this is 7.
Okay, but still.
California does a very, very good job on earthquake codes and even in enforcement. When we compare to other events in the world, like for example, the Haiti earthquake in 2010 was basically the exact same thing as happened in 1989 up in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have 60 dead. They have 250,000. What's the difference? Buildings. Californians have been very good about reacting to each earthquake, seeing what went wrong, where did things fail, and then change the building codes to reflect that.
All right, Pat Abbott, thanks so much for the update.
Good to be here.
The state's lingering drought is causing water quality problems in the county's watersheds. San Diego Coastkeeper takes regular samples of water quality in lakes, streams, and rivers around the county. Experts say the results are not good this year. Of 9 watersheds surveyed, only 4 got fair marks. 4 more were considered marginal, and the Tijuana River watershed got poor quality marks.
When you have water levels get really low, you tend to have really shallow, warm, slow-moving waters that just allow pollutants to really build up, and explosive algae growth, drops in dissolved oxygen, higher bacteria levels. So, the drought and the low water is really exacerbating a lot of our water quality problems.
He also says pollution in fresh water systems means that water will eventually end up in the ocean, where it could foul the county's recreational waters. California lawmakers are joining the fight against sexual assault with a federal bill requiring independent advocates on all college campuses receiving federal funding. Called the Survivor Outreach and Support on Campus Act, it follows what California colleges are already doing, giving support to survivors regardless of whether they report the crime or not. New details tonight about emails at the State Department. This after former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was criticized for using her personal email server during her tenure. An internal watchdog says many state employees in California are not saving emails, which is required by the government. Employees wrote more than 1 billion emails, but saved less than 61,000 for the public record. New leadership is taking over the San Diego Opera. David Bennett has been appointed the opera's new general director. Most recently, he led the Gotham Chamber Opera in New York City. He's known for bold, adventurous presentations of rarely performed operas. Bennett starts in June, by the way. He replaces former director Ian Campbell. Of course, he was forced out last summer after he tried to shut down the 50-year-old opera here. Well, if you read San Diego City Beat, you're in for some changes. The weekly magazine's editor, David Rolland, joins Peggy Pico to talk about his move into politics and the future of the magazine.
San Diego City Beat editor David Rolland, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, so tomorrow is your last day in the office at the City Beat office down there. You were taking on a new job as a communications specialist for Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins, I understand.
Yes, very excited about that.
So why did you decide to leave journalism after all these years?
Well, I think it's been happening sort of gradually, that decision. I trace it back, when I think about it, I trace it back to a visit to Washington, D.C. that I made in 2008 when I went to hang out with Bob Filner, of all people, when he was a member of Congress. And I just got so sort of inspired by, the idea of making public policy. Even though things are so dysfunctional in Washington, I was able to see sort of through all that and just kind of get excited about, being sort of on the other side and helping shape policy rather than doing what I've been doing, which is having, a big indirect impact on public policy in San Diego through editorials and that sort of thing. I wanted to have more of a direct impact and get involved.
You came to San Diego from Ventura to launch City Beat back in 2012. What was your
2002?
2002, exactly. Forgive me, I remember picking up that very first one. What was your editorial vision back then, and do you feel like you achieved it?
Yeah, the idea was that there wasn't much in the way of progressive media in San Diego back in those days. It was dominated by the Union Tribune and the San Diego Reader, you know, and KPBS and the television stations, but nobody was really doing, strong progressive opinion, and that was one of the biggest priorities, is to sort of inject progressive ideas into the political conversation on a week-to-week basis, plus also cover emerging visual art and emerging music and that sort of thing. We thought there were niches there to be filled, and to just do more investigative reporting than was being done.
Well, you certainly took that progressive line in editorializing in the editorial department there. What stories would you say had the most influence or impact? Is there one that stands out here in San Diego? Yeah,
I would say something we've been doing recently, which is our series on the large number of deaths that happen in San Diego County jails. Dave Moss, our former investigative reporter, who continued to do some of this work after he left our office, and Kelly Davis, my associate editor. They worked together on a series of stories a couple of years ago, and their work is continuing still to this day on not only exposing the number of deaths that happen in local jails, but also really describing the circumstances behind the individual people who have died behind bars. So that's probably, right now, I would say that's probably the #1 achievement.
We definitely talked several times about that story, which was really quite profound. Any editorial regrets? Something you did that you thought, wouldn't do it again?
No.
Yeah.
Honestly,
okay.
not. Honestly,
That's
not. No, we just sort of pride ourselves in letting it all hang out and throwing it out there. And you know, if I racked my brain, I could probably think of things that maybe I was wrong about, or I would write differently. But I wouldn't call them regrets. You know, things evolve, and you know, you change your mind. But no regrets.
Sure. Good place to be. Now, when people heard that you and, as you mentioned, associate editor Kelly Davis were leaving, some questioned the future of City Beat. It's still there. It's still being published. Do you think that alternative weeklies like City Beat are still viable?
Yes, absolutely they are. In fact, they have weathered the economic storm better than daily papers across the country. Daily papers have been hit the hardest. I'm not saying that weeklies haven't been hit hard. You know, the recession hit both the Reader and City Beat pretty hard. Hit the Reader a lot harder than it hit us, because they were so big and they had so much to lose.
Why do you think weeklies over papers?
I think that they're just so I'm not an economist. I'm not a newspaper economist, so I don't know. But I just know that alternative weeklies and magazine they have a niche, and people are always going to want to pick up that weekly paper while they're sitting at Starbucks or a cafe or going to the record stores, which really still do exist.
People still do both.
They like to pick those things up physical and have them in their hand and read it while they're having a cup of coffee.
All right. City Beat editor David Rolland, thank you very much, and good luck on your new position.
Thanks very much.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. Why a growing number of public school students are refusing to take new Common Core tests. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
Love is in the air, and the online panda cam was turned off temporarily at the San Diego Zoo so Bayun and Gao Gao can have some alone time. Turns out giant female pandas only breed once a year, so the reproductive clock is ticking. Sniffing for his female playmate, Gao Gao is in the mood for love, and San Diego zookeepers want to take advantage of the opportunity. Bayun's hormone levels have spiked and she's ovulating, but her mate Gao Gao wasn't ready for prime time. He has fathered 5 of the 6 panda cubs born at the zoo. Last year, he had surgery to remove his right testicle because of a tumor.
He's getting older, and he did have some health problems earlier in the last year, and he and Bayun just simply were not able to make the right connection this year.
Oh, they gave it a good try a couple of times, but even giant pandas need a little help from modern medicine. Can you say artificial insemination?
So not very many animals have been artificially inseminated in a zoo setting. Pandas probably more than any other species.
At age 23, Bayun has mothered all of the zoo's panda cubs. Her last, Zhao Li Wu, was born in 2013. In the wild, these adorable bears are considered to be critically endangered, so producing more of them is vital to the environment and keeping the species alive.
So we can know if she conceived in about a month, but we won't know if there's a fetus there or sustained pregnancy for a few more months.
Of course, San Diego Zoo has had a love affair with pandas for decades. This group is on loan from China under a research agreement. By the way, the Panda Cam is back on so you can see them for yourself. We are looking at a warm-up in San Diego, looking at 70s and 80s along the coast over the next few days, even warmer for the Inland Valley with 80s and 90s. Some relief from the heat in the mountains with 60s and 70s. As for the desert, plenty of sunshine, 80s there. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom on Midday Edition. City leaders are looking to go global to increase San Diego's economy and job market. Join us at noon on the radio, KPBS Midday Edition. Of course, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.